Welcome to episode 241 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Lawrence West about sponsorship and taking the NBL to the next level.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who is looking forward to being on stage in a city near you, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan and looking forward to being on stage in a city near you. Actually recording this before Money in Esport. I'll actually be on the stage at International Convention Centre, so stay tuned for content around that. Or go back and check out my tweets at Sean Callanan for some of the content for that event. As always, you can find me at sportsgeekhq.com, all social media channels, or you can contact me the old-fashioned way, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. And if you're tuning in now, check in last week of the OPL season. Check out Gravitas. I'm hoping at time of recording that we are still fighting hard for a gauntlet spot. So at Gravitas on Twitter or at Gravitas OCE on Insta. Before I get into my chat with Lawrence West, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the consulting options that are available that I do with teams and leagues. One of them is education and training and bringing your digital staff up to speed on latest trends or brainstorming sessions around content and reviewing what they're doing. It can be a partial implementation or a partial workshop of the digital to dollars process in reviewing your audiences or reviewing your channels. If you think or if you want your team to get a refresher and be inspired for the start of the season, the middle of the season, the next year, please get in touch. Additionally, if you just want a consulting session that's a little bit like a podcast and you get to pick my brain, you can. You go to sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain and book in for a 2-hour session where we can deep dive on some of your issues and answer them and use me as a sounding board. Or we can talk about a commercialization workshop working with your digital and your commercial teams, how they can unlock the revenue that's in digital. We recently did that with the Rabbitohs, and there will be a podcast following it. So again, stay tuned. And lastly, I'm now in esports. I'm about to speak at Money in Esports. Do you have an esports strategy? Do you know what you want to do in that space? Is it something you want to explore? I'm happy to, help on that front as well, whether it's an education piece to help your business or brand understand esports, or figuring out what entry into the market might look like, whether it is as a sponsor or an investor. As always, get in touch, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. Thank you very much for listening. Now here is my chat with Lawrence West from the National Basketball League. Very happy to be here at Sports Geek headquarters at Creative Cubes with a good friend of mine, Lawrence West, Commercial Manager of the NBL, the National Basketball League. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to be here. And I think I've listened to most of the 200 and something episodes that have gone before me. So, it's great to be here.
It is long overdue. So we've worked together before in previous roles. So as I normally start a podcast, how did you get your break into sport, and how did you end up in the world of sports business?
Yeah, well, I started my career in the UK. So I was started at England Hockey, and I guess you talk about career breaks. Mine was one of those ones where sliding doors moment. I'm told that my CV actually got discarded the first time by the commercial director at England Hockey at the time, on account of the fact they were in England and I was had graduated in Scotland. And my then boss, or the woman who became my boss, said, no, let's give him a go. So took me down to interview, and I ended up joining England Hockey as a PR and comms assistant, basically a year after graduation. I dossed around in Glasgow for a year after graduating and ran the bars and ents and stuff like that at the Student Union. And
so you started in that PR comms role in hockey, and you sort of bounced around that for a few years?
Yeah, so I was at England Hockey for 4.5 years. Started off in PR and comms, comms manager when my boss moved on. We moved offices, and she decided she didn't fancy the hour and a half commute that it was going to be each way. So a bit of a lucky break there. And then probably about halfway through my time, there was a glaring gap in our staffing structure around who was looking after commercial partners. Remarkably, we had some, given that nobody was particularly focused on looking after them. So we added sponsorship to that comms portfolio, and that really covered everything from servicing to supporting the commercial director with the sales side of things to the comms, the media side, EDMs, social media.
It's interesting that so a lot of people start in different places and then end up in different places. And so, when graduates are coming, I want to get into sport. Oh, that looks like a cool job. I want to get to there. They don't actually, that might be the end destination, not the start destination. But I think the other fascinating piece is the merging of comms, media and commercial. And again, it was out of necessity. But a lot of the times the bigger orgs and the bigger teams you get to, it's that separation that actually causes some of the problems. So, I mean, there is sometimes some advantage of being a smaller org and everyone has to pitch in and do different roles, but it would have given you a good insight into, I guess, both sides of the marketing, comms, content space and, hey, what are sponsors looking for?
Oh, completely. I probably knew our audience in the digital sense better than anyone else in the business. First couple of years into that role, it gave me the chance to, I was literally speaking to them through our Twitter comms, through our EDMs, and on events, then managing the media. And then, when it came to bringing on a sponsor like Investec, which we did a year out from the London Olympics for the women's side of the sport, which at the time was the biggest women's sports sponsorship in the UK.
Okay.
And knowing how we could integrate their sponsorship and their leveraging through everything we did, and I didn't have to get it signed off by too many people. I was making decisions and implementing and everything else in between. So I think there's a distinct blurring of the lines when you're in those smaller organizations. It's not a bad thing. I mean, I did sports sponsorship as a dissertation topic at uni.
Okay.
But found myself in the comm side of things for the first kind of 2 or 3 years. And so, and I've always sat across kind of both sides of it, I guess.
So what was it like being a part of that London 2012 Olympics? It was such a success for Great Britain, for London, a really successful games. There's many case studies of participation and high performance and what you can do in the longevity of your sport. What was it like being on the inside of that, at least from an England hockey point of view?
Yeah, amazing, but frantic.
Yeah.
There was always the countdown. It was 2 years to go, it was 1 year to go, and all the rest of it. And we see these things in the media, and those are the one-off PR ops that the BOA or the AOC over here would kind of drive, and the media partners will drive. But for us, it was every single day was a day less to get to London. We developed a program called Hockey Nation, which really tapped into kind of, I think it was around about 12 or 15 strands, everything from getting kids to go along and try hockey at local clubs, which meant mobilizing the movement in the club side of things, to what we did with our sponsors, to signing up more people to newsletters. And it was a kind of a really whole of sport project, so that when we got to London, we knew that the tickets would be sold.
Yep.
Because some sports don't have that luxury. There was a lot of tickets to sell for hockey.
Yep.
There's more than 600,000 tickets across the 2 weeks, and every session was a sellout. And we did some amazing stuff. We had an inflatable hockey pitch on the Olympic site, which took a lot of negotiation with LOCOG, the organising committee. But we did it. We were allowed to capture data at that point as well. So anyone who came in picked up a stick for the half an hour before they went into the venue. It was a chance to capture who they were and follow up with them afterwards to say, hey, did you like the hockey?
Yep.
Come and play. Your local club is here. And we were able to do that geography piece. So it was really full on. I think about 3 or 4 months before the Olympics, I said to my boss, I need a week off. And, disappeared to Tenerife for 4 or 5 days. And it wasn't the best timing, but it was essential just to kind of keep up the momentum as we hit that.
It is very much the outsider looking in, like, there's that 100 days to go media piece. Oh, the Olympics is coming. And there's no thought of what the 2 years before that 100-day mark looks like for everyone at an organising body or that is running a sport, because it is the pinnacle, and you only get one shot every 4 years. So that's you in England. How did you come over to Australia?
Australia was always kind of in our radar for a kind of couple of years before we did. So my wife and I moved here in 2013. We'd got London out of the way. I mean, big reason for staying in the UK when we did was the London Olympics. And then it was always going to be a case of what's next in the career. But we'd been over for my brother-in-law's wedding.
Yep.
My wife's from Glasgow, just outside Glasgow, Paisley. Her brother's been here for a decade more and married in Aussie. And we came out in 2011 and just fell in love with Melbourne and said, well, at some point, this is going to be home for us. We'll make it here. So fast forward 2 years, came out. I was ready to come out without a job. I was quite happy to come to what I see as the sporting capital of the world. And
shout out to all my friends in London and New York and the like that want to dispute that.
Question it. Yeah. Oh, look, I've worked in London. It's a great place to be. I don't think there'd be any shortage of jobs if I ever went back, but it's not on the radar. So, I was looking forward to just kind of coming. My idea was, we're coming to Australia. Well, I'll lie on the beach for a couple of months.
Yeah.
We arrived in late March. So we were starting to head into winter and the beach was not going to be an option.
Yeah.
But luckily my CEO at England Hockey had made an introduction actually to Mark Anderson, who at the time was Hockey Australia's CEO.
Yep.
Went on to swimming and then Collingwood.
Yep.
And
spoiler, he's going to be on the podcast very soon. I've got him booked in soon. So... Well, there's a 7 degrees of separation between podcast guests.
Well, he won't remember it quite as fondly or be quite as grateful as I am to him, I'm sure. But he'd said at the time, he said, I'll happily meet up with you for a coffee, explain the market, the industry, make some introductions. And that was a couple of weeks out from us moving. And then about a week later, sent me an email and said, do you have time to Skype? So early morning Skype to him from the UK. And he said, I got better than an introduction. If you want a job, we've got the comms manager's job available. And that had been vacant for probably the best part of 6 months, I think, after London. So, I moved across here, walked straight into a role I'd been doing in the UK, which gave me a degree of comfort. There's always a local market piece you got to get used to. But and I had a familiarity. I knew the sport. I knew some of the characters in the Australian team. I'd been on the other side of the fence, but seeing the Jamie Dwyers and Mark Knowleses, the Rick Charlesworths, Madonna Blythes, people like that. So it was an interesting switch. I then spent 4.5 years at Hockey Australia. So it was a move I probably anticipated would give me a couple of years to settle into Australia, and actually was there for much longer.
Yeah, and I think that's where we crossed paths. I did some work with both Hockey Roos and the Kookaburras, and around the Olympics and the challenge, the funny of constantly correcting the media on knowing which team is which.
Yeah, we have some fun with that.
Considering, they've both been gold medal winning teams, but the media constantly gets them switched. And so then you're at hockey for a while and sort of facing the same challenges of being Olympic sport, balancing participation and high level stuff. But then you jumped out of sport, which had been there for a while, and worked in a commercial partnership role at Museum Victoria. What was that like, jumping from the world of sport and what and this is where logos go, this is how you set up for a match day, those kind of things that you've done in hockey to Museums Victoria? How was that role different?
Yeah, well, just to touch on the end of my time at the Hockey Australia. So I finished up as GM of commercial and comms there, which covered everything from the comms side of things through to the sponsorship, a lot of the event commercial side of things as well. So when I did move on, I kind of covered it, I'd gone back into that commercial side of things, and ended up at the museum, Museums Victoria, and that was never the plan. I was looking to get out of hockey. I wasn't necessarily looking to get out of sport, but as it was a chance to. They'd separated partnerships from a different function. They were looking for someone to lead that, someone who had a non-arts and culture background. And that's where I came in. So I was 18 months there in the end, building a small team, really establishing, what is it, the museum? And I say the museum, there's 3 of them, being ScienceWorks, Melbourne Museum, and the Immigration Museum, but really collectively what they can offer commercial partners and how can commercial partners leverage a relationship to benefit people coming through the doors. 2 million people go through the doors. It's a large institution and very varied in what it delivers. So, but it was a steep learning curve. The complexity of an organization that size and with the cultural and historical significance and everything that goes with it, I I wasn't ready for it, but I certainly wasn't aware of quite how complex that world is, and how strong some feelings run in terms of, well, we can't take money from corporates. There's a where we really shouldn't. We're independent and all that kind of stuff.
So that's a challenge, but it like just being in a different sector, knowing that they are competing for the same corporate sponsorship dollars with a completely different angle than sport does, but also some of the stuff that is similarly in audience, and you will see your brand with these 2 million visitors. So it's a lot. Some of that's the same, but then there's this altruistic and supporting the arts that's a little bit different. The sport is leaning on, I guess, less and less the show your support for sport and that kind of thing, and being more commercial. So I find it fascinating looking at what commercial partnerships look like in these different sectors, because I think there is similarities, but then there's also, they do that really well. How can we do that? And I think we're seeing sport do that as it's building up more precincts and, their own high performance centers and those kind of things. And they're moving more into those types of partnerships with partners. So, it would have been an interesting time.
Yeah, and I think if you strip it back, you're talking the same things, right? You're talking audience engagement, you're talking trying to create brand advocacy, do it in a genuine way, potentially from the sponsor's point of view, add value, create a real, genuine relationship with the audience, whoever that audience is, whether it's sport, whether it's arts and culture. I think for a long time, sport relied on the logo slap. It's fair to say it still exists in a lot of sports. We're in basketball, and there are a lot of logos still in our world, and we'd love to clean that up a little bit, I think. But it's still a very important part, depending on the partner and what they're trying to achieve. In a museum context, we couldn't do that. I had a funny conversation once where I was asking about measurements for certain areas of the building and the plaza at the front of the museum. And the reaction I got wasn't to give me the answer to the question. It was to, you're not going to turn this into a sports stadium, are you?
Yeah. They don't want a logo next to the dinosaur.
Yeah. This dinosaur is sponsored by kind of thing. Yeah. But at the same time, the philanthropic side of things it's still there within the arts and culture, certainly. But I think in the arts and culture sector, that's having to change as well, because more the philanthropics are supporting a wider range of causes, and many of them are developing their own pieces of the puzzle, if you like. You only have to look at Tazi and Mona, and there's one of the wealthiest people in the country, and he's got his own museum and whatnot. So there's a different. You got to think differently now. With we did some great stuff with PowerShop as a sponsor there around education on wind energy and how a wind farm works and that sort of thing, which ties into what the museum is trying to do and imparting knowledge and giving people an experience, and it helps PowerShop with a lot of their core objectives around the messaging that comes with what they do.
I think the key thing there is, and I think it's part that sport can learn from a place like museums, is that so many sponsors are now looking for experiential and experiences for their customers or with their message integrated in that piece. And that's something that museums do very well and have for many years, So I was lucky many, many years ago in a university placement. I was at ScienceWorks 2 weeks before it opened.
Yeah, wow.
Right, so I was there programming and putting together touch screens and the like, and it was fascinating watching children interact with these devices. And this was again for the tech and for my tech friends listening. These were IBM running PS2. Touchscreens that had the little film on top with the little dots. Like, we're not talking iPads and things like that. But it was fascinating watching, the kids, use the product and get the experience. But then the amount of kids I saw punching these screens, and luckily enough, they were hardy enough to take it. And ScienceWorks was, at that time, this is 25 years ago, was groundbreaking in that it's an experience, everybody. You're going there to touch and feel and be part of the museum. And 20 years later, you're seeing that in all of the museums at Museums and Vic.
Yeah. ScienceWorks still, it's double the capacity it was built for. Yeah. They get 500,000 people through the door every year. It was built for 250. They spent a lot of money on renovating a couple of the exhibition spaces recently. One particularly for teens, which is that so-called hard to reach audience, and one for much younger kids who turns out they learn the key skills in life earlier than was originally thought. So science and maths and STEM type skills. But you learn actually in that consumers don't behave like you expect them or want them to. You're talking about the kids punching the screens. You can put 20 different people in front of the same exhibit or the same activity, and they'll all interact with it differently, which is actually a challenge when you come back to things like the sponsorship side of things, because they're trying to create leveraging activities and that sort of thing that for a consumer, but they've got to consider how the consumer will actually interact with it.
Yeah. It is a bit of, once it's out of the workshop and you've done the brainstorm with your agency and said, we're going to do this, there's a little bit of now test and learn and see what they actually do. So, after that stint, you've now found yourself at the National Basketball League, the NBL here in Australia. I spoke to Jeremy La Liga, and congrats, Jeremy, being nominated one of the 40 under 40 from Leaders. And the NBL is, up and to the right. If you're talking in startup land, all things projecting well. How have you found jumping into that? Because it's almost the stuff that Jeremy's done and Larry Kesselman. It's sort of NBL's in startup rebirth mode. What's it been like in your time at the NBL? Yeah,
I've been there since the back end of 2018, and it's fair to say, I think it has had that startup feel for the first few years under Larry's ownership and Jeremy's stewardship. It's also fair to say, though, that we're moving out of that phase now and stepping up. One of the things that we've pushed hard in that space the last few years has been the challenger mode. You talk about challenger brands.
Yep.
The NBL's very much been the challenger to, or has looked at itself certainly as a challenger to some of the more established codes in this country. But you look at it now, and I think we're all keen to say we're standing on our own 2 feet. We're a genuine competitor to those those kind of more established leagues, whether that's BBL, AFL, NRL. We got some way to go in certain aspects, broadcast metrics, and all the rest of it. But the startup piece is definitely been that way. It's been lean, but you look at the business. I'm probably now halfway down in terms of long-serving members. We've got a lot of staff come in the last 8-9 months. Whole new division looking after 3x3 basketball. Commercial team went from 4 to 7.
I want to talk about that because that's what I spoke about with Jeremy about that first 100 days of when they got the keys and getting a broadcast deal and getting an app and getting websites and and pretty much just saying, hey, we're back. And you're right, that phase is gone and now it's about solidifying. And so just recently announced a new broadcast agreement with ESPN and SBS. And talk about how that, I guess, the broadcast deal and how the NBL has gone about a little bit, I guess, differently in doing their own broadcast. Can you take us a bit behind the scenes of that? Yeah,
one of our, I guess, strengths, but it came out of a weakness in the early days was we own our broadcast product, which allows us to do some really good stuff in the digital and creative world and engaging with our fan base. But from a broadcast perspective, the new deal now with SBS and ESPN will mean every single game of the 1920 season is available free, live streamed through SBS On Demand, 67 games on SBS Viceland, and the 56 or so games on ESPN. So it's what it's allowed us to do is bring it to a wider audience with the SBS Viceland and On Demand in particular. And then with ESPN, it's really about lining ourselves up as within the home of basketball in Australia. ESPN's had the NBA, WNBA rights, and
it's a must-have for basketball fans to say, hey, I want to watch the NBA, and they're going to have ESPN because it's a way to access it. And so it puts, and this is the hard work that Larry and Jeremy have done in forming ties with the NBA, with the NBA NBL series, which I've discussed previously, to put the NBL alongside and as adjacent to the NBA as it can. Yeah,
the plans with ESPN we're expecting that we'll see people roll straight from an NBA game into an NBL game. Hopefully, the numbers, the stats around Australians who follow an NBA team to some extent or follow the NBA are staggering, particularly in our kind of core demographic. I guess that kind of 18 to 35 male, and what we would love to see is, you can support your Golden State or whoever, but make sure you've got an Australian NBL team as well, because we find when people turn up or when they watch it on TV for the first time, but particularly when they end up in a venue, they're blown away. Whether they've got a past with the league and have fallen away for kind of the best part of a decade, as many people did, maybe longer, or they're seeing it for the first time. They're blown away by the experience, by the quality, by the entertainment factor as well. So that kind of halo effect from the NBA is very much a strength for us. We aren't threatened by the NBA in any way, shape or form. It's really how do we play up that relationship and that alignment.
And definitely I think it's sort of been driven by Larry as part of his involvement with Melbourne, but then obviously now with the league, and we're seeing what the Sydney Kings are doing. Perth Wildcats have done it for a long time. He's putting a product on the floor that looks and feels and is entertainment and sport together, and which is very much what the NBA is. So you get that feeling of, this is an awesome game to be at live. And, I think that's the piece that I've always thought of the NBL. I'm a basketball fan. There's jerseys up here in this office, but I can't go to an NBA game every week because I'm in Melbourne. So, but I can go to an NBL game. It is fun live. I do. I think I was at a game, Melbourne United game a couple of years ago, trash talking some of the Adelaide 36ers and had awesome fun backwards and forwards and getting people, like the broadcast piece is, and the importance of the broadcast piece is to bring more people there, to know the product is there. Yeah.
I think, a lot of sports struggle with the experience in venue doesn't always match what you see on TV. Yep. You can tightly zoom in on a crowd, particularly in an outdoor venue, and the stadium might look a bit more full or whatever. But with our venues being indoors, with the hype, the music, the noise, plus the quality and display on the floor, the NBL product is one of these products that is best seen live in venue. And I think basketball generally is like that. But there are a lot of other sports that you might see what you see. I'm a Formula One fan, but I've got no intention other than popping down to Albert Park. I don't really want to go around the world following F1 because I'll get a better experience watching on TV.
And it's funny, all the trends that we're seeing in sport, you mentioned before, of like the BBL and, fast netball and all of these shortened forms and more entertainment packed. That's what actually with basketball and the NBL have been doing for years.
Yeah,
right? So there's no need to shorten it. And I understand, you've got 3-on-3 and those kind of things, but there's no need to be changing that entertainment product because, and it fits better in, in the smaller venues, indoor venues, big screens, all of those kind of things. So all of the bells and whistles that they're adding to other sports, the NBL and basketball's always had. Having dance competitions and timeouts and t-shirts thrown into the stands, all of those things make for the whole live experience.
Oh yeah, you're knackered when you leave. You're the assault on the senses is quite something, but in a really positive way. There's never a dull moment. You don't find people sitting there flicking through their phone in the middle of an NBL game, which I've been guilty of in other sports.
Yeah. So that's the product. I guess that's the product, and that's the entertainment product off the floor. What's been the effect of a guy like Andrew Bogut coming back to the league as a NBA champion, NBA, star, and did exceptionally well with the Golden State Warriors team, to come back and play for the Sydney Kings? What kind of bump do you think the Bogut effect had for the NBL?
Well, if you take Sydney as a first and foremost, their attendances grew 51% last season, year on year. Yes, there's more to it than Bogut. They've done a great job with what they create as one of the, if not the best, in-venue stadium atmosphere in the country. But they, and that's just throw down the gauntlet to the other teams in the league. The effect on attendances was big. The Kings have seen the biggest uptick in audience, but also number of games people are seeing and all the rest of it. So that's been good. I think it's also added that credibility publicly that the NBL is much closer to the NBA than people think. This is, yes, Andrew's one of the older players in the league, but at the same time, he went back into the NBA for the final series. He wasn't coming out here to be put out to pasture. He's out there and going back into the US to shore up the Warriors team. So, that was a big bump for us in terms of just that credibility piece, I guess. And it got people talking, ahead of last season. It's always key. We come on straight after footy finals. And so the narrative in the wider community and media is usually footy finals. And then you start eking into maybe the cricket, depending on what's happening in the summer. To have someone like Andrew Bogut sign, be so heavily invested emotionally, but financially as well with the Kings as well. It really created a buzz conversation, and even since then, he's no wallflower, so he's stirring up a few things and creating. We know that the sport's about the narrative, sports about the storytelling and the characters. Sports where you've got every team full of lacking personalities, or you control personalities too much, then you lose that interest piece in the public domain, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the comms guy, and you must love Bogey, because they put a microphone in front of him and he gets spots in the paper, he gets on the news, he picks Twitter fights, and he does give that credibility to the non-basketball audience that go, oh, basketball's back, oh, Bogut's playing the NBL, and that's good, because that gets the chatter going, that drags more people in. He drags people in, whether he's playing in Sydney or he's on the road. Oh, Bogut's in town. This is the game I have to go to. But then also the conversation that's also happening in basketball circles is just as important. Like the chatter that all of the Boomers squad, the Boomers of the Australian national team, that they're all talking about, which NBL team am I going to land at when I finish, whether it's Paddy Mills or Dellavedova or Joe Ingles. They're still well and truly in their NBA careers and got many years ahead of them, but they're also thinking, well, I want to come back, I want to give back to the sport that I love, and I want to be part of this ecosystem.
Yep.
And that's great. And then so you've got that end, which is very similar to, I guess, what the MLS have done in the US in bringing great football stars to a new market in the US. And you've got that top end talent coming back. But then the other part is you've got this Next Stars program, which is real opportunistic in the way that the college system and the NBA are currently, I won't say working together, it's probably the opposite, or, that there's a gap. Explain to people what, I guess, the Next Stars program is and what opportunities it's bringing to the NBL.
Yes, and Next Stars gives young overseas talent, which predominantly has been American, obviously, but it is more widely just overseas talent, the chance to come and play professional basketball in a professional league in Australia as an alternative to going through the college system in the US with a view to getting drafted. So they're essentially draft ready athletes who would be eligible for the next draft, and what it's doing is providing them an alternative option. So they can't earn money, they're restricted in how much they train if they go through that college system. There's an educational component to it, obviously, and there's a number of them that they want to hit the course, start competing against experienced professionals who have that extra yard in their minds as well as the physiological side of things, and so they get a different level of competition on the court too. The idea being that they are then better prepared when it comes to draft time. So from an athlete point of view, it's great for them as an alternative option to the college system in the US. For us, it allows us to bring new overseas exciting young talent. We've had and
this is additional to traditional American imports coming in and playing that have played college or played a season or two of NBA that have taken up import spots in the past. This is
Correct.
for 17, 18, 19-year-olds that have been lost to the college system and effectively, and not ready for draft or not ready for the NBA. They're a little bit lost, as far as where they go, and it's a different option to say, well, you could be playing college somewhere, and like you said, either sitting on the end of the bench or that kind of thing, or do you want to start your pro career? Yeah. Here's an option. So it's an added piece.
Yeah, and the program started. Brian Bowen Jr. last year he was at Sydney Kings, but he was the first official Next Star. He's ended up signing a two-way with the Pacers, but Terence Ferguson before him was the catalyst, if you like. So he wasn't officially a Next Star, but he came to Australia and then got picked up in the draft after playing a year with the Adelaide 36ers. So that's where it came from. We've had Brian last year, and now we've got 4 young players coming into the league this year. The most exciting of whom, or the most high profile, shall we say, is certainly LaMelo Ball. Yeah.
So the Ball family coming to the NBL and playing in Illawarra. Which is in New South Wales. It's going to be interesting to see how the Ball family play. But again, it's going to bring one of the things that's important to the NBL: eyeballs, attention. it's going to be competition. Like, he's going to have a target on his back. Every scrappy, Australian guard that's sitting in front of him, it'll be their Shane Heal, Charles Barkley moment. Like, they'll come up and they'll be looking for that highlight play that ends up on House of Highlights because they've crossed him over. And likewise, it's going to go the other way. So I think that's the exciting piece. I think there's going to be a lot of people that have followed, the ball story, Lonzo and the dad just doing what he does. It was going to be interesting to see how he plays in this market. I don't know how the Lithuanian media accepted him when they were playing over there. But I think from an Australian media point of view, they'll eat it up, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
But it absolutely will. And you talk about the Bogut effect. The LaMelo effect has been, in some cases, already bigger. So, Bogut previously, his signing, it tipped the charts in terms of some of our most popular posts in social context. Obviously, the amount of mainstream media coverage. LaMelo Ball signing was crazy. Barack Obama is now an Illawarra Hawks follower.
Okay.
So officially, the guys of the Hawks, the jersey sales, the membership sales just went through the roof. That kind of next 24, 48 hours after he was announced as a Hawks player. And from a social and digital side of things, look at some of our most popular posts, and Bogut's maybe on the cusp of the top 10, but it's all LaMelo, it's RJ Hampton going to New Zealand Breakers, and the growth of the social channels on the back of that. So the Hawks have one of the highest growth rates of Australian sports teams, and everything that goes with that. So their profile's growing.
And you've got this, the NBA is one of the best 12-month always on, let's track everything of the, we want as much content as possible. So now when you're following a team that's looking at the draft class and what lottery picks they've got, they're going to be now following, LaMelo, RJ Hampton to go, is this a first rounder? Is he a top, is he a draft lottery pick and that kind of thing? So it again draws international attention, more US attention to the league. And then again, it's once you're watching the game for LaMelo, and then you're like, hang on, this is a good game of basketball. It is something I can watch and follow and those kind of things. So it has that, I guess, that additional effect for the NBL from a broadcast audience point of view. Yeah,
completely. I mean, international markets, we know Australia is by global standards, a small market. The NBL is broadcast live in just about 30 countries now. The US has coverage of it. China's got coverage. These are places we want to, inverted commas, expand into. What that looks like, we wait and see. NBL, NBA is a great example. We're just building those relationships of the NBA and the NBL. We go into China every year. In fact, we've done 2 tours to China this year, one with Southeast Melbourne Phoenix and one with an all-star team. So the visibility, the fact that people are tuning in or logging on to see these exciting young athletes because they've seen the media hype, they've seen the 400 and something broadcast articles that happened off the back of LaMelo Ball. It creates exposure for the league. It also creates exposure for those other players, as you say, and that might actually open up professional opportunities for some of the other guys in the league. Yep,
and you did talk about expansion. There has sort of been talk around will the NBL expand? If so, where should it be expanding to? Obviously, got a new franchise starting with, as you just mentioned there, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix starting. Is there still more places that you're looking to expand into?
Certainly, like a 9-team league, just from a fixturing point of view, causes some challenges. So we would like to see a 10th team at some point in the next few years. Larry Kesselman and Jeremy have been very open about that desire. Equally open that we're looking at Tasmania as certainly one of those options. So we've just announced recently the NBL preseason blitz will go to Tassie. We'll take all 9 teams.
Okay.
There'll be an all-star and all NBL 1 team. So NBL 1's the tier beneath, which will contain Tasmanians as well in it. So local interest angle. So that's our preseason for this 1920 season already. Likewise, spending a lot of time, not me, but Larry and Jeremy at this stage, talking to Tasmanian government, Tasmanian businesses. What is the support for a
professional
Tasmanian team? A professional team. You look at cricket, I think, is the only the
Yeah,
biggest
so the Hobart
codes.
Hurricanes effectively in the Big Bash and local cricket there, and then you've got a couple of AFL teams that play home games down
Fly
there.
in, fly out kind of model.
Is there a sustainability from a sponsorship point of view? I remember a friend of mine, Craig Gilbert, played for the Tassie Devils back in the day before they unfortunately folded. But and so how do they fit into that space, and is it something that I guess the whole state gets behind? So be interested to see how it develops.
And you do need more than government and corporate support. You need a fan base first and foremost. One of the things we've been doing over the last few weeks since we announced our interest in exploring a Tassie option is trying to capture the interest of Tasmanian fans. Register your interest, show your support. Build out that database so that we can go down the route of communicating with them, engaging them on their ideas. I don't know. We might end up in a scenario where the team name is being picked or whatever that could look like. But we want to know. We really need to know that there's a popular demand for a Tasmanian team. Tasmania's got a challenge with the north-south divide. You always end up with the north-south or north the river, south the river, or east-west as it is in Scotland, where I'm from. So having a unified professional franchise there in Tassie would be a great thing, but we need to demonstrate the support for it first.
So, and then the other part that the NBL has expanded has been its relationship with Basketball Australia and getting stronger ties with lower tiers of sport, with the announcement of NBL 1 being a reformed, lower tier, replacing what was the Seabull.
Yep.
So I started my basketball fandom following the Ballarat Miners. With Brian Gorgon as coach and then Al Westover as coach, both NBL coaching greats. And they were playing in Seabull, but now that is now NBL 1, and so it's the tier below NBL, and you're now both driving that league both commercially. So what kind of options does that open up for the NBL and I guess basketball in general and that partnership?
Yeah, and I think you're right there. It's the basketball in general piece. What we had, federated model, as a lot of sports are, we had the complication of a federated model, Basketball Australia, state bodies, and the NBL as a separate professional private business. So bringing a lot of that together, we, the NBL, are now essentially the commercial agents for Basketball Australia, which what that means is we're in the marketplace. We're the single voice, if you like, talking in the marketplace to brands, sponsors, and the likes around engaging them, involving them with basketball. So, basketball is the second most played team sport in the country behind soccer. 1.1, nearly 1.2 million people played last year. These aren't fuzzy numbers. These are the government's numbers. Yep. So we're always very careful to say these are not, just us pumping up our own tires.
It's not just people touching a basketball.
Yeah, right? No, this is genuine people reporting that they have played basketball for a certain amount of time in the last 12 months. So what it does give us as the NBL, and when I'm, myself and my colleagues are in the market talking to brands, it's that whole of sport approach. We can be talking to people about everyone from the Boomers and the Opals of the national team through to junior champs, NBL. Commercialization of the WNBL also falls now in as part of that. So we don't own or run the WNBL. That's Basketball Australia. But if we have a partner, for example, that says, love the NBL product, love professional basketball, need a dual gender message, we can now offer them the WNBL as well. Whereas before we had complexity of, we don't really own the rights to that, and we can facilitate the conversation.
We'll call the guys at the WNBL, we'll see how it does, and it just becomes a harder deal to do.
Absolutely. So that's been a big part of it. The grassroots programs, so Aussie Hoops as well, those the equivalent of the Oz Kicks, getting people into the sport at a very early stage. And then NBL 1 is that's actually been about lending, as much as anything else, lending the NBL brand to the next tier down, creating a more obvious, visible pathway for participants, for fans as well. It's played in suburban venues, around. Well, NBL 1 at the moment is a Tassie Victoria product. Its expansion looks likely into likes of New South Wales and Queensland for the brand. And it's a case really there of, again, expanding the reach that we have from a consumer point of view, but also creating a professional credibility. So we've brought the broadcast overlay to those. So every game is being live streamed on YouTube. Highlights packages through all the social media channels, really upping that visibility. That's 300 70 odd games over a 5-month period. So it's a huge amount of content, using the same platforms and products that we use at NBL level to pump out a ridiculous amount of content. And that's what people are consuming. They just crave for it.
And then sort of going back to the point before, it helps NBL be part of the conversation 12 months of the year. You can transition basketball fans from watching NBL to capturing a little bit of NBL 1, seeing highlights, knowing that they can go to a game, connecting, playing on a Friday night, to knowing that I can go to a local stadium, whether it's MSAC, whether it's Broadmeadows, whether it's Ballarat, whether it's Bendigo, and go watch a game, and sort of starting to make that connection, like you said before, whole of basketball.
Yeah.
So how do you get... so when you are talking to partners, how do you get the whole the data picture of what that whole looks like? What do fans look like? What does participants look like? Who's going to games?
Yep.
How's that been sort of trying to corral all of that data together?
It's certainly not an easy piece, but we rely on a couple of kind of third parties to help us in a lot of that. So we work with the guys at Nielsen around a lot of our fan activity and numbers and measurements. So how many people are attending games, what their views of it, everything from how highly do you rate the food and bev on offer to how many games have you gone to this year, who do you go with, all that sort of thing. So that's one piece of the puzzle. We also work with YouGov, so big global research and polling company. They've got a product called Brand Index, which is heavily at the moment focused towards sports teams and sports bodies. So that allows us to identify people who've identified as a basketball fan or an NBL fan and compare them against any other segment we wish to. We can go against national population, but we can also look at NBL fans versus A-League fans versus BBL fans versus you name it, and then and drill down. So on some level, that's behavioral. It's attitudinal. What do you think of shopping, or what are your behaviors around how much money you spend next time you buy a car or buy clothes, or
and so that info is the request for that info coming from sponsors, or is that stuff that you're using to polish and use to close like your deals and proposals to put those pieces in, or are they saying tell us how, if you understand my, is that coming, or is it request in, or is it stuff that you're pushing out to sponsors, or is it a mix of both?
It is a mix of both. I think we use it at the moment as a key differentiator for us in the marketplace. We're really proactive in it. So, and the good thing is we don't have to wait and go back and get a report written. Something like a YouGov, we've got dashboard access that we can go in, we can pull information out really quickly. So we're definitely using that as a selling tool, because for us, and we can track brand metrics through that as well. So if we bring a partner on board and we say, okay, our metrics are showing as this at day one of the partnership. Within 6 months we'll measure it again. We'll measure it again in 12 months. Let's use metrics other than just advertising equivalent value. And here's 1 million people through basketball this year and all the rest of it. But at the same time, there's certainly from the bigger brands and sponsors, there's an expectation that you deliver on this sort of insight, this sort of information, so that they've got to justify their budgets. And
you want to differentiate rather than just saying, here's our 1 million fans, or here's our 1.5 million fans, or here's our 500,000 fans of this age group. To be able to say, because you've got to go a little bit further than those numbers.
It takes it out of being a volume game as well, because realistically, the NBL basketball still doesn't have the fan base yet to compete with an AFL, for example, or an NRL in the northern states. So for us, we still got a really good base number, but let's step away from just who has the biggest pot of people and really drill into, are they people who are even relevant for you, and are we changing their mind or the behaviors on certain things? And that's a much more powerful conversation to have. And I think particularly senior marketing people within businesses respect when you can have that conversation on a one-on-one basis.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, Lawrence West from the NBL. I want to get into Sports Geek Closing 5. Mindful that my MacBook has decided to restart. And
it's been doing that for a while,
We're about to get the MacBook rebooting sound, so apologies if that's going to come booming through my speakers at any moment. But Sports Geek Closing 5, do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
The first ever event was probably watching my dad play cricket on a wet and windy cricket pitch in Edinburgh, but the first professional sports event would have been Hibs versus Falkirk in around about 94, 95 in the Scottish Premier League, and it was a a Dreek 0-0 draw.
Okay.
Yeah. That's remarkably, I'm still a Hibs fan today. But
what was what was some of the fan experience notes? Was fan engagement invented back then?
Definitely not. I think I remember the outdoor shed-like toilets, and we were in the East Stand, which was the kind of the famous stand, the one you wanted to be in. It's the equivalent of the Cop, but not quite as exciting. And it was, I wouldn't say it was a crush, but you were certainly, as what would I have been, about 9-year-old?
Yeah.
It was an experience.
Yeah, I think one of my early football experiences was going to a game at Collingwood game at Victoria Park. I might have been 7 or 8, and collecting steel beer cans and then standing on them to be able to see. All good on my dad. Good parenting. He had to drink 6 cans for me to be able to see the football.
Well, he took one for the team there, clearly. Yeah.
It's exactly wouldn't pass fan engagement or OH&S requirements right now.
And my first Aussie sports experience was when that trip in 2011 that we did, and we saw St Kilda Essendon at what was Etihad Stadium at the time.
Yeah.
I was blown away by the athleticism of these guys running around on a huge field. So,
you would have been to a fair few sports events in your time over at Olympics and now basketball. Do you ever, and we've obviously talked about fan experience, we've seen the gourmet food options that keep opening up at every venue. Do you have a favourite food memory at a sports event or a go-to food?
Yeah, I mean, when you work in Olympic Games, you don't eat, so that doesn't count. My go-to generally is hot chips.
Yep.
Simple, and you know what you're going to get. Probably the one that stands out, though, we had after the British women won bronze medal at London 2012, Investec was their sponsor. They also sponsored the England Test cricket team.
Yep.
So we were at Lord's for a full-on Lord's lunch experience. We were playing the West Indies at the time, so that was one that, at the positive end of things, certainly sticks in the memory.
It is, I've been lucky enough to have dinner at Lord's Long Room, and it's a very special place in the sporting world. What's the first app you open in the morning?
It's the Weather Zone app. I took up triathlon training this year, and so a 5 a.m. start through Melbourne winter is very much what's the real temperature, what's the feels like temperature, and how many layers do I need? Yeah,
it is very much that case. And then also the fact that it could rain and sleet and then be sunny during your run.
Yeah, layers. It's all about layers, not thick layers, just lots of thin layers.
Yeah. Who is someone that the podcast listeners should follow and why?
I got a couple of people. I think from an NBL point of view and following a kind of external voice, someone like Roy Ward from the Age is covering the league really well at the moment. Love what he writes, gets in depth and tells a story, and come from a storytelling point of view. I love reading his stuff. And then more in that sponsorship space, Kim Skildum-Reid, very well known in the kind of consulting world for sports sponsorship, and she's run a couple of workshops recently here and in New Zealand, and I was lucky enough to attend one. And she just talks a lot of sense. And,
I ran into Kim. Like we'd known each other on the Twitter sphere for many years, and I ran into her at the Virgin Lounge in I think it was Brisbane 6 weeks or so ago. So I hope to connect with Kim and talk sponsorship on the podcast soon. But definitely check out what Kim says. And exactly, it's like, unfortunately, people get pat on the back for talking a lot of common sense. This is unfortunate.
In the Twitter world, I think that's probably that's where the bar is, right?
This is true, but Kim is very much a leader in the space. Last one, what social media platform is your MVP? And you can probably answer that personally, but then also maybe put your commercial NBL hat on and sort of give the MVP for the NBL point of view.
Look, I think in both cases it's probably Instagram for now.
Okay.
I've moved away completely from Facebook. I actually logged in at Facebook for about the first time in a week today, and then those gaps are getting longer and longer. My habit is just flicking through Insta, more and more looking at stories rather than the kind of main feed.
Yep.
From an NBL point of view, it allows us to, we talked about the fact we own our broadcast content. So things like the highlights reels, the top 10 plays, which we attach Aldi Mobile as a brand partner to. Those sorts of things allow, from a commercial point of view, allow us to commercialize some of the content we've already got. But crucially, from a fan engagement piece, it's really digestible and it's there and I think it just works for us at the moment.
How can people connect with you? What's the best platforms, and what are your social handles so people can send you a message?
Well, it's probably not Facebook, obviously.
That's fine.
LinkedIn, yeah. I mean, as a commercially minded person now, in terms of my role at the moment, LinkedIn is always open on my computer screen and the phone notifications. So I think I'm just Lawrence West, just Lawrence-West in LinkedIn. Instagram is Lawrence C West.
Okay. Well, we will share a link and tag you on our post on LinkedIn. But thank you very much for coming on the podcast, and look forward to the NBL season ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Can't wait. It's rapidly coming up.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to Lawrence West. Send him a tweet, Lawrence CW on Twitter, or connect with him, Lawrence West, on LinkedIn. Like a lot of guests, becoming more and more active on LinkedIn. And check out the NBL and all that it offers. I'm sure a few will be following the LaMelo Ball story and seeing how he goes at the Illawarra Hawks. So if you want to listen to this episode, if you want to forward it on and check out the show notes and connect with Lawrence, you can go to sportsgeekhq.com/241. Which is this episode, 241. Additionally, before I sign off, don't forget, if you are a Sports Geek podcast listener, you can get access to Sports Geek Nation. Currently, it's closed. If you Google it, closed, not available. But if you are a podcast listener, you know the special link to access it. That is sportsgeeknation.com/connected. Please join in, connect with sports executives like Lawrence in different channels in our Slack group on esports, sponsorship, digital, ticketing. So please join in and ask me a question there. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Need help with your digital rate card? Not sure how to price your assets? Is there a disconnect between digital and commercial? That is where Sean works best, in digital divorce counselor mode. Book a time for a call with Sean to discuss the Sports Geek process. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.